Hey guys, so we're continuing with part 2 of the Parallel Worlds series, a very esoteric and adventurous series. As I told you in the last clip, this is a necklace with an aventurine stone from Cornwall, England, which is right about here. I think I pointed to the Isle of Skye, and if I didn't, may my dear Scotlanders forgive me. But Scotland is probably a very ideal place for this clip because I'm actually going to talk about cold water immersion and open water swimming and how they relate to translation interpreting. I have nothing else to talk about, but I needed to record clips for you, so just being very imaginative. Alright, so let's take it away. What is cold water swimming or open water swimming all about? Well, it includes many different things. First of all, no sea or no lake is like any other sea or lake. There are definitely common factors. There's common ground, but in fact, there is no ground. Well, there is underneath the lake. But they're all different, just like every interpreting or translation context is different. Not necessarily easier or more difficult, but different. Lake Superior is majestic and incredible in itself, but it's different on the North Shore than on the real North Shore, which doesn't happen to be the North Shore. Hopefully I confused you. No, North Shore is actually the Western Shore, and it's Minnesota and leading up to Canada. But the real North Shore is actually in Canada, going from east to west or west to east or whatever. So it's different, and you have to take that into account. And all the oceans are different. And swimming in salt water is different than swimming in fresh water. And by the way, curiously in Spanish, fresh water is sweet water, agua dulce. Okay, even because salt water, for example, goes down to -2 Celsius, while fresh water obviously does not. Cold water immersion in -20 Celsius is very different than cold water immersion in +20 Celsius, and I've done both. And in fact, it's much easier to go into water temperatures at like 0, at +20 Celsius, if that's even possible. The coldest I've experienced was like +4. But it's much easier than going into warmer waters at -20. One time I was in Odessa on the shores of the Black Sea, and there was steam coming off the Black Sea because the air was so cold. But let's get back to translation interpreting. So context, it's all about context, and every little nuance of context is going to make that translation or interpreting assignment different, right? Like, who is your client? Is it the prosecutor? Is it the defense attorney? Which side of the deposition? And how well does the client speak English or not at all? Is there somebody who might be interfering with the translation or rather interpreting? Or if you're working on a translation, does the author speak English and should you consult them? Is the author even available? Is it a fiction book? Is it a non-fiction book? Is it a creative non-fiction book, right? It's different. Might be similar, but it's different. Similarities are not identical. I think I said something very deep right now. Okay, so just to give you an example out of open water adventures, I read this book called Man vs. Ocean. It's about a guy named Adam Walker, who was the first Brit to complete the Ocean's 7 challenge, which is different than Ocean's 11. But Ocean's 7 are these dangerous 7 straits. I probably won't name all of them, but the strait, the Irish Channel, the English Channel, sorry, not the Irish, the North Channel between England and Ireland, the English Channel, the Strait of Gibraltar, and then Hawaii, Japan, and probably something else. But at one point he thought, like, how tough can Hawaii be? Because it's warm waters, what can possibly happen? Until such time, or maybe it was in Japan, but I think it was in Hawaii, until such time as he got stung by a Portuguese man of war, which has 70% of the poison of a cobra snake. So, drawing a parallel to interpreting or translation, there's no job that's easy, quote unquote, and expect rip currents and underwater challenges. Okay, so let's take it component by component. Cold water and open water immersion. First of all, obviously in swimming, unlike running, there are different strokes. And these could easily be likened to the modes of interpreting, except in swimming I know 4 and in interpreting I know 3, but if you combine them, then you can have a lot more. In open water, nobody really uses butterfly or backstroke. Well, maybe just for rest. I would usually use front crawl or breaststroke. But it's up to the swimmer, actually, what stroke they're going to use. And that's going to depend on the context and on the purpose. For example, if I fell into cold water and if it was an accident, and if I knew I was relatively close to shore, like half a kilometer or 1 kilometer, then I'd probably opt for front crawl, especially if I had headgear, which would be unlikely if it were an accident, but nevertheless. But if I could see the shore, I'd probably opt for front crawl. If I couldn't see the shore, I'd probably conserve my energy and do breaststroke, because in breaststroke you can do above the water breaststroke, which in Russian we call Finnish breaststroke, and just, not immerse your head. So it depends on the context. But that's an important point, is you pick the mode of interpreting based on the purpose and based on the context. Is it going to be shushatage or simultaneous with equipment? Or is it going to be consecutive, or is it going to be a combination of the two? Like when I do open water swimming, I'll sometimes switch between front crawl and breaststroke. And I have never done the Ocean 7, although I am a pretty solid open and cold water swimmer, but I just do breaststroke to rest. And also in interpreting, you can switch between consecutive and simultaneous. Like imagine me interpreting between 2 people, and one is my client seated to my right or left, and then there's somebody across the table. Well, I'd probably be interpreting the other party to my client via shushatage, and I'd be interpreting my client consecutively. Maybe not. It kind of depends on my whim and on the environment and on the context. Okay, we talked about hidden dangers, but in open and cold water, just in open water, in an ocean, you have to keep track, or at least be aware of the fact that there might be currents and rip currents, right, that would take you out into the ocean. But a true professional is not necessarily going to be afraid of them. It doesn't mean that I won't go into the ocean. I just know, okay, there might be rip currents. Let me feel them. Let me perceive them. Are they there? I'll give you an example. Recently, I was in San Francisco, and I went for a swim in, I forget what the name of the bay was. Well, it wasn't a bay, it was open ocean. The waves were kind of big, but I know that the waves are really no danger to me. We'll talk in just a second about true and false dangers. That's kind of like false friends. But the waves is something that somebody might consider a danger, whereas if you know how to dive under the breakers, it's not really a danger, except if you get stuck in like no man's land where there are still breakers, but you're not by shore, but you haven't gotten past the breakers. You don't want to get stuck in no man's land. But I knew I could handle the waves. But then I drove down further south, and there were really no big breakers, but it just looked very like turbulent, very foamy, and I thought to myself, it's likely that there are currents. I went into the water and I felt it. And yes, I could probably swim, but it just wasn't fun, and I didn't go deeply into the ocean. And later I found out that 2 people were pulled away into the open seas right at that very beach. So my perception didn't fail me. Also, it depends on whether or not you have a supporting boat. Like, do you have a colleague? Do you have somebody who can, relieve the garrison, figuratively speaking? If I had a boat that were guiding me, I couldn't care less about the rip current, so what? Okay, so hidden dangers. Let's talk about false and hidden dangers. Like in open water swimming, or especially in cold water swimming, if you don't know the scene, if you are not accustomed to this field, you might think that something is dangerous when it's not, and vice versa. For example, in true ice water, which is defined as sub 41 Fahrenheit or 5 Celsius, your hands and feet will get numb. They will, but it's no big deal. You can keep swimming with hands and feet that are numb. that is not like a red flag danger signal. Likening it to interpreting, it might be like, oh, somebody is going fast. So what? If you're a trained interpreter, fast simultaneous is not a big deal. In fact, I prefer fast. Just like I prefer swimming in like 10 or 13 degree water to 25 degree water, or especially 33 degree water. Anyway, another quote unquote not red flag, your face would feel sort of frozen and a little bit painful if it's true ice water. That is not a big deal, and it usually goes away, just like your neck might feel painful for the first 2 minutes. But now something actually dangerous that you might not perceive is if you start feeling warm in the water, like that would be weird. Or if you start slightly sinking and it's harder for you to stay afloat, or if you get a little bit confused, like people might not notice these symptoms, but they are actual dangers, just like there are actual dangers in translation interpreting, right? Like long consecutive is not necessarily a danger if you're trained to handle it. Long chunks in consecutive. But words and false friends, words that you don't know and false friends are actual real dangers. Okay, let's talk about approaches. Well, when you're doing ice water swimming, I'm sorry, it's like past 4 a.m. right now. Unless it's a competition and you're actually diving in a training session, I would actually relatively swiftly but gradually ease my way into cold water. And the reason you do it swiftly is so that you don't talk yourself out of it. Just like, in simultaneous, if I wanted to warm up, I would start with shadowing, then I would do paraphrasing, then I would do simultaneous. I wouldn't necessarily dive straight in. On the other hand, to liken it to a quick approach, if I need to start interpreting in quarter for a witness, I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm just going to swiftly and confidently walk up to a witness stand or whatever and pen in hand, notepad in hand, and start interpreting. Cold water, you need consistency. It's not about necessarily, I did half an hour today. It's about doing it every day. Just like in interpreting, it would be great to practice or read, even for translation and so forth. We already talked about contexts and contests. Temperature is super important because the categories are different. Like 0 to 5 is ice water, 5 to 10 is cold water, 10 to 15 is maybe cool water. That's not even an official category, and anything about 15 is whatever, it's just normal water, Vladimirian water. So same deal with translation interpreting. What are you translating or interpreting? Fiction, non-fiction. They're not necessarily easier or harder. Somebody might say, well, ice water is harder and 10 to 15 is easier. Not necessarily if you're swimming the English Channel and it's like 15 degrees and you have to stay in the water for 8 hours. It's not necessarily easier. It's just different. You can still get hypothermia. What else? I put down here in my little cheat sheet, respect the sea. Like, even if it seems really calm, even if it seems really, really gentle. I'll give you an example. This was actually in Scotland, either just south or just north of Edinburgh. I went swimming in the North Sea and it seemed very, very serene, even though the North Sea has some really turbulent storms which I've never seen. But anyway, just out of nowhere comes this wave and it hits me from behind, and I actually lose my insulated hat. So, I've learned to respect the sea because you never know what is coming. Just like you want to respect every single interpreting assignment because you never know what is coming. There is a challenge in every little single one. Not necessarily, but almost. That's my spiel about cold water. There's probably more to be said. Just like in the running clip, I said that the faster the race, the longer or at least the more thorough the warm-up has to be. Same with cold water. Colder the water, the more thorough the warm-up should be, and the more technical the warm-up after you swim should be. That's really important. In interpreting and translation, I would say the same. Like, let's say it's a really technical text or a really technical assignment. I would do a very thorough word list, right? Like, for example, I don't know, it's medical or it's legal. I would prepare very, very well as far as terminology. Or if the speaker is going to machine gun their speech, I would also prepare, even if the speaker is going to speak for 15 minutes, I would be maybe watching a lot of YouTube videos of that speaker. But I think at this point, I'm slightly tongue-tied or mind-tied. So we better call it a night. But yeah, what is my call to action? Besides just go and do cold water swimming, which by the way is really good. It slows down the aging process. It's really good for immunity. It's incredible. It's really good mental training too. But to liken interpreting, ease into it, prepare just like with running, and always beware of hidden dangers, underwater reefs, but at the same time, don't be afraid. Like in Russian, we say, he who fears the wolves never goes into the forest. So go into the forest just knowing that there might be wolves and, you know, have your favorite weapon of choice. So prepare, and also prepare when you get to the assignment. I thought of another example. In cold water swimming, the preparation comes with all the training you've done before, but also if I know I'm going to swim in a certain body of water, I get there, I observe, I perceive, okay, what is the water like? Are there waves? Is it sunny? What is the beach like? That's the context, and that's like getting to the interpreting assignment, and you observe, okay, who is here? Can I salute them? Can I say hello? Can I talk to the client? You know, not the training that you've done priorly, but the training right there on the spot. And at least in cold water, I'm always prepared for contingencies. I know, okay, if I have to get out, can I get to shore? Like, where can I get to shore? So be prepared for contingencies. That's like, you know, having a dictionary, having a notepad, having your partner. Like, for example, if I were interpreting, in my last clip, I gave an example about oil and gas. Like, let's say I were interpreting about something unfamiliar, but I had a partner or a colleague who was familiar with the topic. I would probably place him right in the front row and say very convincingly that if I look at you meaningfully and significantly, that means I need your help, and I will sort of lip voice the word that I'm having trouble with, and you give me the word, or something of this sort. Like, I would make some sort of a pact with them. So I would prepare for contingencies. And even if it's not that, I usually tell the speaker, if you're going to use acronyms, spell them out. You know, something of the sort. Are there any technical words, any jargon that I should be aware of now so I can look it up on my phone? So some cute, funny parallels between interpreting more than translation. I guess I'm sort of discriminating here against translation, but anyway. Oh yeah, before we end off, I am going to share one more tip of advice, or rather a parallel between cold water swimming and interpreting and translation. And it's this. In cold water swimming, especially ice water swimming, there's only one body part, really, that I protect, and it's the head. Because the head is not fat insulated like other body parts, and it's vulnerable. And you are liable to have repercussions if you don't protect it, especially long term. Obviously, if it were an emergency and I had to swim, I could. It would be harder because the head gets really cold really fast. But I do protect the head, and it's an obvious metaphor. If you're a linguist, translator, interpreter, please, pretty please, for me, protect your mind in any way that you can. In a good way. Doesn't mean don't use it, just don't abuse it. But don't overdo it. I can just see some fresh and green interpreter walking into court in an insulated swim cap and saying, Your Honor, you know, I'm following this channel and Vladimir said you need to protect your head, so I bought an insulated swim cap. Okay, before we get overly comical and humorous and familiar here, I'm just going to end off. And hopefully this was useful, a little bit fun, or a lot of fun, a little bit useful. And I shall see you guys in the next clip. Ciao.